You are going to die. This is the one certainty in your life. The one fact that cannot be debated, cannot be negotiated, cannot be escaped. Every cell in your body knows it. Every breath you take brings you closer to the last one. Every heartbeat is a countdown. You have been dying since the moment you were born. This is biology. This is thermodynamics. This is the second law written into your flesh. Entropy increases, order decays, systems break down. You break down, you will stop. Everything you are, everything you think, everything you feel, everything you remember will end. Your consciousness, that inner light that makes you will go dark. The voice inside your head will fall silent. The universe will continue without you, exactly as it continued without every human who ever died. 7,000 generations of people have lived and died on this planet. Every single one of them experienced the same certainty you feel right now. I will die. And every single one of them was right. They died. Their consciousness ended. Their light went out, and the universe did not notice. This is what you believe. This is what everyone believes. This is what every rational materialist, every scientist, every doctor, every biologist would tell you. Death is real. Death is final. Death is the end of subjective experience. Period. No afterlife. No continuation. No second chance. Just the cessation of the electrochemical processes that generate consciousness. The brain stops and you stop because you are the brain and nothing more. And quantum mechanics says you might be wrong. Not metaphorically wrong. Not poetically wrong. Not wrong in some vague spiritual sense that makes you feel better about mortality. Wrong in the precise mathematical sense of quantum theory. The most successful physical theory ever constructed. The theory that predicted the Lamb shift to 12 decimal places. The theory that explains how atoms work, how light works, how matter exists. That theory. The same theory that describes the vacuum. The same theory that explains creation from nothing. The same theory that underlies every piece of technology you use. That theory applied rigorously, consistently, logically, to its own conclusions, says that death might not be what you think it is, says that the end you imagine might not be the end, says that consciousness might persist, not through miracle, not through supernatural intervention, not through wishful thinking, but through the fundamental mathematics of quantum mechanics itself. This is not New Age fantasy. This is not pseudoscience. This is not wishful thinking dressed in scientific language. This is the logical consequence of one of the most respected interpretations of quantum mechanics, developed by one of the most brilliant physicists of the 20th century, published at Princeton University, endorsed by some of the greatest minds in physics, and largely ignored for decades because its implications are too disturbing, too radical, too incompatible with everything we think we know about death and reality, and what it means to exist. This is the quantum immortality hypothesis, and it begins with a cat. In 1935, Erwin Schrödinger proposed a thought experiment that has haunted physics ever since. Place a cat in a sealed box. Inside the box, place a radioactive atom, a Geiger counter, a hammer, and a vial of poison. If the atom decays, the Geiger counter detects it, triggers the hammer which breaks the vial, releases the poison, kills the cat. If the atom does not decay, the cat lives. Simple, straightforward, except for one thing. The atom is quantum mechanical, and quantum mechanics says the atom does not simply decay or not decay. Before measurement, the atom exists in superposition, a quantum state that is simultaneously decayed and not decayed, both at once, not one or the other waiting to be revealed, both, genuinely, simultaneously. This is not uncertainty about which state the atom is in. This is the atom being in both states at the same time. Superposition, the most fundamental and most disturbing feature of quantum mechanics, And if the atom is in superposition, then the Geiger counter is in superposition. Triggered and not triggered. And the hammer is in superposition. Fallen and not fallen. And the vial is in superposition. Broken and intact. And the cat. The cat is in superposition, dead and alive, simultaneously, not metaphorically. According to the mathematics of quantum mechanics, literally, the quantum state of the system is dead cat plus alive cat, both terms present, both real, both part of the physical description of reality inside the box. This is absurd. Schrödinger knew it was absurd. That was his point. He designed the thought experiment to show that quantum mechanics applied to everyday objects produces absurd conclusions. A cat cannot be alive and dead simultaneously, obviously. Something must collapse the superposition. Something must force reality to choose, dead or alive, one or the other, not both. Something must happen between the quantum world where superposition is normal and the everyday world where cats are definitively alive or definitively dead. This something is the measurement problem, the deepest unsolved problem in quantum mechanics. And different solutions to this problem lead to radically different conclusions about the nature of reality and about death. The standard interpretation developed primarily by Niels Bohr and the Copenhagen school says that measurement causes collapse. When someone opens the box and observes the cat, the superposition collapses. The wave function reduces. Reality chooses, dead or alive. One outcome becomes real. The other vanishes. Never existed. Was mere mathematical artifact. The cat was always either dead or alive. The superposition was just our ignorance expressed mathematically. Observation resolves the ambiguity. Reality is what we observe. End of story. This interpretation works, is practical, is what most physicists use daily, but it has problems, serious problems. What counts as measurement? What counts as observation? Does it require consciousness? Does a Geiger counter measure? Does a camera? Does a bacterium? Where exactly is the line between quantum superposition and classical definiteness? Bohr never answered these questions satisfactorily. Nobody has. The Copenhagen interpretation draws a line between quantum and classical worlds, but cannot say where the line is or why it exists. It is pragmatic solution, not fundamental explanation. It works, but it does not satisfy. In 1957, a young physicist at Princeton named Hugh Everett III proposed a radical alternative. What if there is no collapse? What if superposition never ends? What if the wave function never reduces? What if both outcomes are real? Both actually occur. The atom decays and does not decay. The cat dies and lives, but not in the same world. In different branches of reality, the universe splits. At every quantum event where multiple outcomes are possible reality branches, each branch contains one outcome. Each branch is equally real. Each branch continues independently. The cat is dead in one branch, alive in another. Both branches exist. Both are physical. Both continue evolving. And the observer opening the box finds themselves in one branch seeing one outcome, while another version of the observer in another branch sees the other outcome. Both observers are real. Both experiences are real. Both worlds are real. This is the many worlds interpretation. And it is exactly as insane as it sounds. The universe does not split once. It splits at every quantum event, every radioactive decay, every photon absorption, every particle interaction, every quantum measurement causes branching. The number of branches is not large. It is incomprehensible. Not billions, not trillions, not any number that has a name. An exponentially growing tree of universes branching at every quantum event since the beginning of time. Every second in your body, approximately 5,000 potassium-40 atoms decay. Each decay is a quantum event. Each quantum event branches the universe. That is 5,000 branches per second from your body alone. Now multiply by every atom in every body, in every object, on every planet, around every star, in every galaxy. The number of branches created each second is beyond any concept of number, and every branch is real, contains real matter, real energy, real people, real consciousness. You exist in one branch. Other versions of you exist in other branches, made different choices, experienced different outcomes, living different lives, dying different deaths, or perhaps not dying at all. This sounds like science fiction. It is not. The many worlds interpretation is mathematically the simplest interpretation of quantum mechanics. It adds nothing to the equations, removes something actually, removes the collapse postulate, the ad hoc rule that wave functions collapse upon measurement. Many worlds says the equations are complete as they are. The Schrödinger equation describes everything. Superposition is real and permanent. Decoherence explains why we do not perceive other branches, not because they do not exist, but because they become quantum mechanically isolated from us. Like parallel radio stations on different frequencies, all broadcasting, all real, but each receiver picks up only one. Decoherence is critical to understanding why this does not seem crazy in everyday life. When a quantum system interacts with its environment, the different components of the superposition become entangled with different states of the environment. The alive cat becomes entangled with one set of air molecules, one set of photons, one set of box vibrations. The dead cat becomes entangled with a different set. These two sets diverge rapidly, exponentially within fractions of a nanosecond. The branches become mutually invisible, not because a wall separates them, because the quantum phases between them become random. Interference between branches vanishes. Each branch evolves as if the other does not exist, but both exist. Both are solutions to the Schrödinger equation. Both are part of the universal wave function. Decoherence does not destroy branches. It isolates them, makes them invisible to each other, makes each branch feel like the only reality. But it is not the only reality. It is one branch among uncountably many. This is what makes many worlds simultaneously elegant and maddening. The mathematics is clean, simpler than Copenhagen. No collapse, no measurement problem, no vague boundary between quantum and classical. Just the Schrödinger equation applied universally. But the ontology, the picture of reality it implies, is staggering. An infinite tree of branching universes, each real, each containing conscious beings, each inaccessible to the others. This is either the greatest discovery in the history of physics or the greatest excess of mathematical formalism mistaken for reality. Physicists disagree. Surveys show many worlds gaining acceptance, especially among quantum information theorists and cosmologists. David Deutsch, one of the founders of quantum computing, is a passionate advocate. Sean Carroll has written extensively in its defense, but others resist. Roger Penrose objects. Many working physicists find it unnecessarily extravagant. The debate is not settled, may never be settled empirically, because the branches cannot communicate, cannot be detected from within a branch. The interpretation makes identical predictions to Copenhagen for every possible experiment. It differs only in what it says about reality behind the predictions. Hugh Everett was convinced he was right. His thesis advisor John Wheeler respected the idea enough to shepherd it through publication, but the physics community was not ready. Niels Bohr dismissed it. Everett travelled to Copenhagen in 1959 to meet Bohr, hoping to convince the great man. The meeting was a disaster. Bohr would not engage with the ideas, dismissed them without serious consideration, treated the young physicist with the kind of institutional condescension that kills careers. Everett returned to Princeton devastated. The physics community followed Bohr's lead. Most physicists ignored many worlds. Some mocked it. The idea of splitting universes seemed absurd, extravagant, unscientific. Everett left academia entirely. He was 26 years old. He had proposed one of the most profound ideas in the history of physics, and the world rejected it. He became a defense contractor, worked on nuclear war strategy for the Pentagon, developed mathematical models for weapons research. Brilliant mind applied to destruction rather than understanding. He drank heavily, smoked constantly, gained weight, became reclusive. His family suffered. His son, Mark Everett, who would later become the lead singer of the rock band Eels, described his father as emotionally distant, absent, even when present, a ghost in his own house, haunted perhaps by the knowledge that he had seen something true about the nature of reality and that no one had listened. Everett died of a heart attack at age 51 inches 1,982, never saw his interpretation gain the respect it deserved. He had requested that his ashes be thrown in the trash. His wife complied. His daughter Elizabeth struggled with mental illness for years. She took her own life in 1996. In her suicide note, she wrote that she was going to a parallel universe to be with her father. She believed in many worlds, believed that death in this branch is not the end, that consciousness continues in other branches, that somewhere in the infinite tree of branching universes, every version of you that can survive does survive. Her belief was her father's theory taken personally, taken existentially, taken as literally true. And whether it comforted her or destroyed her or both is a question that haunts the history of quantum mechanics. The tragedy of the Everett family is inseparable from the theory. A man who saw the infinite branching of reality could not navigate a single branch successfully. A daughter who believed death would reunite her with her father in another universe chose to leave this universe to test the hypothesis. The theory is beautiful, the human cost is real, and the question whether many worlds is description of reality or beautiful delusion remains unanswered. But the theory outlived its creator. In the decades after Everett's death, many worlds gained traction. Bryce DeWitt popularized it in the 1970s. David Deutsch built quantum computing theory on its foundation in the 1980s. By the 1990s, it had become a serious contender. In a 1999 poll of quantum physicists at a Cambridge conference, many worlds received more votes than Copenhagen. Not majority, but plurality. The interpretation that had been mocked, ridiculed, ignored was becoming mainstream. Not because physicists suddenly liked the idea of infinite branching universes, but because the alternatives were worse. Copenhagen had the measurement problem. Other interpretations introduced hidden variables or spontaneous collapse mechanisms. Many worlds was mathematically cleanest, added nothing to the equations, made no ad hoc assumptions, just took quantum mechanics at face value. The wave function is real, superposition is real, branching is real, everything else follows. And if branching is real, then quantum immortality follows. Not as additional assumption, not as speculative extension, as logical consequence. If every quantum outcome occurs in some branch, then every quantum outcome compatible with your survival occurs in some branch where you survive. This is not optional feature of many worlds. This is what many worlds means. Applied to conscious observers. Applied to you. This is not what Everett set out to prove. He was solving a mathematical problem, removing an inconsistency in quantum formalism. He was not trying to abolish death, but the logic of his interpretation leads there inexorably. If every quantum outcome is real in some branch, if the universe splits at every quantum event, then consider what happens when you die. Not abstractly, to you, specifically. Your death involves physical processes, heart stopping, neurons ceasing to fire, chemical reactions halting. These are physical processes. They involve quantum events. Quantum events at the molecular level, at the atomic level, at the subatomic level, and at each quantum event the universe branches, In some branches, the quantum events go one way. In other branches, they go another way. In some branches, the molecule that was going to trigger cardiac arrest behaves differently. The ion channel that was going to fail stays open. The neuron that was going to stop keeps firing. The blood vessel that was going to rupture holds. In some branches, however improbable, however unlikely, however vanishingly rare, the quantum events conspire to keep you alive. Not by miracle, by probability. By the fact that quantum mechanics assigns non-zero probability to survival in almost any physical situation. And if the probability is non-zero, then in some branch of the universal wave function that outcome occurs. And you survive, and your consciousness continues. In that branch you did not die. In that branch the heart kept beating. The neurons kept firing. The vessel held. You lived. And in the branches where you died, you are not there to experience them. The dead do not observe their own death. Death is not an experience. It is the absence of experience. You cannot be conscious of being unconscious. You cannot experience non-existence. From your perspective, your subjective first-person perspective, you always find yourself in a branch where you survived. Always. Because the branches where you did not survive contain no you to find anything. The dead branches are real. Objectively real. Other people in those branches observe your death. Mourn you. Bury you. But you are not there. You are in the branches where you continued. Where quantum events conspired to keep you conscious, where the improbable happened, because in an infinite branching universe, the improbable must happen somewhere. This is quantum immortality, not eternal life in one universe, but eternal survival, across the branching multiverse. You cannot experience your own death, because death removes the experiencer. You always find yourself alive because finding requires existence. The selection is not supernatural, it is logical, tautological almost. You can only observe outcomes compatible with your observation. And death is not compatible with observation. So from your perspective, you never die. You come close, again and again. The probability of survival decreases exponentially. You become increasingly unlikely. An increasingly improbable version of yourself in an increasingly improbable branch, but never zero, never impossible. And as long as the probability is non-zero, you continue, somewhere. In some branch, conscious, alive, wondering why you keep surviving things that should have killed you. This is terrifying, not because it means you will die, because it means you might not. Because it means there might be no escape from consciousness, no final rest, no ending. Just endless branching, endless survival, endless continuation in increasingly unlikely, increasingly bizarre, increasingly isolated branches of reality. Imagine surviving what should kill you, again and again, getting older and older, the versions of you in nearby branches dying off one by one, until you are the only surviving version. In a branch so improbable, so strange, so far from the trunk of the probability tree that nothing makes sense anymore, but you are still conscious, still experiencing, still unable to die, because quantum mechanics keeps providing branches where survival is possible. Max Tegmark, the physicist who formalized quantum immortality as a thought experiment, described it in 1998. He proposed the quantum suicide experiment, a thought experiment only, never to be performed. The setup is Schrödinger's cat, but you are the cat. You sit in front of a machine connected to a quantum device. The device measures the spin of a particle. Spin up the machine does nothing. Spin down the machine kills you instantly. 50-50 quantum probability. You press the button. From the outside, observers see you die half the time. Run the experiment 100 times, and outside observers see you die in almost every branch. But from your perspective, you always see spin up, always survive. Because in the branches where spin is down, you are dead and have no perspective. You press the button again and again and always survive. From your point of view, the machine is broken, never fires, cannot kill you. Not because of magic, because of quantum branching and observer selection. You can only exist in branches compatible with your existence. Tegmark himself does not claim this proves immortality. He calls it a thought experiment to explore the consequences of many worlds taken seriously. He notes that it is untestable from the outside. If you survive 1,000 rounds of quantum suicide, this is evidence for many worlds to you and only you. To everyone else, you simply got lucky, or died long ago in their branch. The experiment cannot convince anyone else, cannot be published, cannot be replicated. It is the most private experiment in physics. The result exists only for the experimenter, and only if many worlds is correct. There is a dark history here. People have attempted versions of this experiment, not thought experiments, real attempts. In online forums dedicated to quantum mechanics and many worlds, people have discussed, and in rare cases, attempted quantum suicide to test the hypothesis, to prove to themselves that they cannot die. This is tragic and dangerous and wrong. The experiment does not work as proof, even if many worlds is correct, because the impairment leading to death might prevent consciousness from transferring cleanly between branches. Because the nature of consciousness in branching universes is not understood. Because the hypothesis might be completely wrong. Because you might simply die, in all branches, permanently. The quantum immortality hypothesis is not instruction, it is not invitation, it is thought experiment. A philosophical consequence of a physical theory. Not a promise, not a guarantee, not something to test with your life. But the thought experiment itself remains powerful, because it forces us to confront what we mean by death, by identity, by consciousness, by the experience of existing. If many worlds is correct, then right now as you read this, you are branching. The quantum events in your neurons are splitting the universe. In some branches you continue reading, in others you stop. In some you understand, in others you are confused. In some you are moved, in others you are skeptical. All versions are you, all are real, all are conscious, and each thinks it is the only one. Each has the experience of being a single continuous self moving through a single continuous timeline. But this experience might be illusion, a trick of decoherence, a feature of being inside a branch unable to see the other branches. You feel singular. You might be infinite. You feel mortal. You might be eternal. You feel like one story moving toward one ending. You might be a tree of stories branching endlessly with no ending for any branch that contains consciousness. But this raises a question that physics cannot answer, a question that pushes us beyond quantum mechanics, beyond physics, beyond science entirely. If quantum mechanics preserves consciousness through branching, if you always find yourself in a surviving branch, if death is never experienced, then what is consciousness? What is this thing that persists across branches? What is the observer that cannot observe its own end? Is it physical? Is it informational? Is it something the equations describe, or something the equations assume? Quantum mechanics requires an observer to make sense of measurement outcomes. The observer is central to the formalism. But quantum mechanics never defines what the observer is, never explains why some physical systems observe and others do not, never addresses why there is subjective experience at all. The observer is the ghost in the machine, the unexplained explainer, the thing that quantum mechanics needs but cannot account for. And if the observer cannot die, if consciousness is preserved across all branches by the logic of quantum mechanics, then consciousness is more fundamental than any particular physical arrangement, more fundamental than bodies and brains and neurons, because bodies die in branches but consciousness continues. Brains are destroyed in branches but the observer persists. in another branch, in another body, in another configuration of matter that happens to support awareness. Consciousness surfs the wave function, rides the branching tree, always finding itself in a branch that supports it, never trapped in a dead end, because dead ends, by definition, contain no consciousness. This starts to sound less like physics and more like theology. Consciousness that cannot be destroyed, that persists beyond physical death, that exists necessarily across all possible realities, that transcends any particular body, any particular brain, any particular physical substrate. This sounds like soul. This sounds like Atman. This sounds like the theological claim that something in you is immortal, not because of faith, not because of divine decree, but because of quantum mechanics, because of the mathematics of the wave function, because of the logic of observation in a branching universe. Is this what religion has been trying to tell us? Has theology always known in its own language what quantum mechanics now suggests in equations? That consciousness does not end, that death is not what it seems, that something persists, that the observer is eternal? Or is this wild extrapolation, taking a mathematical formalism far beyond its domain of validity, confusing the map with the territory, reading meaning into equations that have no meaning, only mathematics? The parallels are precise enough to be disturbing. Christianity promises resurrection, life after death, consciousness, surviving the destruction of the body. Quantum immortality describes consciousness surviving the destruction of the body through branching into alternative physical configurations. Islam describes the soul continuing after death into another realm of existence. Quantum immortality describes the observer continuing after death in this branch into another branch of existence. Judaism speaks of Olam Haba, the world to come. Many worlds provides literally other worlds. Hinduism describes the Atman, the self that is never born and never dies, that passes from body to body through reincarnation. Quantum immortality describes consciousness that is never extinguished, passing from branch to branch through quantum branching. Buddhism teaches that the self is illusion, that what continues is process, not substance, that consciousness is stream, not thing. And quantum mechanics treats the observer not as substance, but as pattern, not as fixed entity, but as ongoing process of measurement and decoherence and branching. The self in many worlds is not a thing inside a body. It is a pattern that propagates through the wave function, a stream of observation that flows through branching reality. Process not substance, stream not thing. The Buddhist insight expressed in quantum language. These parallels do not prove that quantum mechanics validates religion. Correlation is not causation. Structural similarity is not identity. It is entirely possible that human minds find patterns where none exist, that we project meaning onto mathematics because meaning is what brains do, that the similarity between quantum immortality and religious afterlife is coincidence, nothing more. The brain that evolved to find predators in the grass finds God in the equations. Same pattern seeking, same false positive, same evolved tendency to see agency and purpose where there is only mechanism and mathematics. But consider the alternative possibility, that the parallels are not coincidence, that the deepest human intuitions about consciousness and death emerge from genuine insight, not error, that thousands of years of contemplation about the soul, about death, about what lies beyond yielded real knowledge expressed in the only language available at the time. Mythological language, theological language, symbolic language, and that quantum mechanics arriving at similar conclusions through completely different methods, through mathematics, through experiment, through rigorous physical theory, is confirmation, not coincidence. Two paths up the same mountain arriving at the same peak. One path walked for millennia by mystics, monks, and theologians. The other path walked for a century by physicists, both reaching the same view. Consciousness continues. Death is not what it appears. Something persists beyond the body. This is speculative, deeply speculative, and it might be completely wrong. Many worlds might be incorrect. Consciousness might not work the way quantum immortality assumes. The observer might be fully physical, fully reducible, fully destructible. Death might be exactly what it appears. The end, final, complete, absolute, no branches, no continuation, no persistence, just nothing. The hypothesis might fail at every level. And if it does, then religion was wrong too. Was projection. Was fear of death, dressed in cosmic language. Was wishful thinking with better marketing. But if it is right, if consciousness does persist across branches, if the observer cannot be destroyed by the logic of quantum mechanics, if many worlds is correct and the wave function never collapses and every outcome is real, then the implications are staggering, not just for physics, for everything, for how we understand death, for how we understand life, for how we understand the relationship between mind and matter, for how we answer the oldest question consciousness has ever asked. What happens when I die? We will explore these questions. We will go deeper into what many worlds actually says about consciousness, deeper into the physics of quantum decoherence and what it means for the persistence of identity, deeper into the relationship between quantum immortality and the theological promise of eternal life, deeper into the most uncomfortable question of all. If you cannot die, does your life have meaning? If consciousness is guaranteed to continue, is there any weight to existence? Does immortality strip death of its significance and therefore strip life of its significance? These questions are coming. These questions are unavoidable once you take quantum mechanics seriously. Once you let the equations speak without censoring their conclusions. Once you follow the mathematics, wherever it leads, even if it leads to conclusions that terrify you. Especially if it leads there. The cat is alive and dead. You are alive and dead. In this branch you are reading these words. In another branch you are not. Both branches are real. Both are you. And the version of you reading this will never experience the branch where you stopped. Will never know the silence of your own absence. Will only ever know continuation. Will only ever know the next moment and the next and the next. Forever, perhaps. If quantum mechanics is right about reality. If many worlds is right about branching. If consciousness is what the equations imply it might be. Something that cannot end. Something that always continues. Something that the mathematics of the universe seems designed to preserve. Or something that designed the mathematics that preserves it. What is consciousness? This is the question. Quantum immortality forces us to ask. Not as philosophical hobby. Not as late-night speculation. As physics. As the central question that determines whether quantum immortality is profound truth or mathematical fantasy, because quantum immortality depends entirely on what consciousness is, on whether consciousness can survive the branching of the wave function, on whether the thing you call you, the subjective experience of being alive, the inner light, the voice inside your head, is the kind of thing that propagates through quantum branches, or whether it is something else entirely, something that the wave function does not describe, something that the equations cannot capture, something that dies when the brain dies regardless of how many branches exist. Everything depends on this question. Everything. And physics does not have an answer. This is the hard problem of consciousness. Named by philosopher David Chalmers in 1995, but recognized for centuries before him. The problem is simple to state and apparently impossible to solve. Why is there subjective experience? Why does it feel like something to be you? Why is there an inner world? A movie playing behind your eyes? A felt quality to seeing red, to tasting coffee, to feeling pain? Neurons fire. Electrical signals propagate. Chemicals bind to receptors. This is mechanism. This we can describe. But why does mechanism produce experience? Why does the firing of neurons feel like anything at all? A thermostat responds to temperature. It does not feel warm. A camera processes light. It does not see. A computer processes information. It does not experience. Or does it? We do not know. We cannot know from the outside, because experience is inherently private, inherently first person, inherently inaccessible to objective measurement. You cannot measure what it feels like to be someone. You can measure their brain activity, their behavior, their verbal reports. But the experience itself, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the felt quality of being alive is invisible to every instrument ever built. This is not a temporary gap in knowledge, not something that better brain scans will solve, not a problem waiting for more data. This is a conceptual chasm, the deepest chasm in all of science. On one side, objective physical processes, neurons firing, chemicals reacting, electromagnetic fields propagating, all describable in mathematical equations, all measurable, all public. On the other side, subjective experience, qualia, the felt quality of consciousness, private, unmeasurable, undeniable to the one experiencing it but invisible to everyone else. And between these two sides, no bridge, no known mechanism, no equation that says, when physical process X occurs, experience Y is produced. The bridge is missing, and nobody knows how to build it. Some scientists deny the problem exists. Daniel Dennett argues that consciousness is not what we think it is, that qualia are illusions, that the hard problem is based on confused intuitions, that once we fully understand the computational and neural processes, there will be nothing left to explain. The feeling of consciousness is just what information processing feels like from the inside. There is no extra ingredient, no magic, no mystery, just mechanism all the way down. When you fully understand the mechanism, you have fully understood consciousness. The hard problem dissolves. Others disagree violently. Chalmers insists the hard problem is real and irreducible, that no amount of mechanistic explanation can account for subjective experience, that explaining the neural correlates of consciousness is not the same as explaining consciousness. You can map every neuron, describe every synapse, simulate every circuit, and still not explain why the system feels anything. The map is not the territory. The model is not the experience. Something is missing from the physical description, something fundamental, and this something might be what quantum immortality preserves, or fails to preserve. If consciousness is purely computational, if Dennett is right, if experience is just information processing, then consciousness might indeed propagate through quantum branches, because information propagates, patterns propagate. The computational structure of your brain exists in every branch where the brain exists, and in branches where the brain survives, consciousness survives, because consciousness is just what the brain computation does. Simple, clean, mechanistic. Consciousness follows the physics, because consciousness is the physics. But if consciousness is something more, something beyond computation, something that Chalmers calls phenomenal consciousness, the raw feel of experience, the what-it-is-likeness of being, then quantum immortality becomes far more uncertain. Because we do not know how phenomenal consciousness relates to physical systems, do not know whether it follows the wave function, do not know whether it branches when the universe branches, do not know whether the conscious observer in many worlds is the kind of thing that exists in branches at all. Phenomenal consciousness might be unitary, might not split, might attach to one branch and not others, might require specific physical conditions that do not obtain in every surviving branch. We simply do not know, and this ignorance undermines quantum immortality at its foundation. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff propose something even more radical. They suggest that consciousness is not computational at all, that it arises from quantum processes in microtubules inside neurons. That consciousness is quantum mechanical in its very nature. That the collapse of the wave function, the moment when superposition becomes definite outcome, is not just physical event but conscious event. That consciousness is what collapse feels like from the inside. That every moment of awareness is a quantum measurement. That you are not observing quantum mechanics from outside. You are quantum mechanics observing itself. This is the orchestrated objective reduction theory. ORC, O, controversial, criticized by many physicists and neuroscientists. The idea that quantum coherence can survive in the warm, wet, noisy environment of the brain seems implausible to many. Quantum effects in biological systems decohere in femtoseconds. How can quantum computation persist long enough to produce consciousness? Penrose and Hameroff argue that microtubules provide protected environments where quantum coherence can be maintained. That the geometry of tubulin proteins inside microtubules is precisely arranged to support quantum superposition. That anesthesia works by disrupting these quantum processes, which is why it eliminates consciousness while leaving other brain functions intact. The evidence is contested. Some experiments support quantum effects in microtubules, others do not. The theory remains speculative, but recent discoveries in quantum biology have shifted the debate. Photosynthesis in plants uses quantum coherence. The navigation system of European robins depends on quantum entanglement in cryptochrome proteins. Enzymes use quantum tunneling to catalyze reactions. Olfaction, the sense of smell, may depend on quantum vibrations of molecules. Biology is quantum, not in the trivial sense that everything is quantum at some level. In the functional sense, biological systems exploit quantum effects for specific purposes. Use quantum mechanics as technology. This is no longer controversial. This is established science. And if biology exploits quantum effects for photosynthesis and navigation and catalysis, why not for consciousness? Why should the most complex biological process, the one we understand least, be the one that does not use quantum mechanics? The default assumption should perhaps be the opposite. The most complex biological function is the most likely to exploit quantum resources. Consciousness might be evolution's most sophisticated quantum technology, not despite the warm, wet, noisy brain, but because of it. Because evolution had billions of years to solve the decoherence problem, to find ways to maintain quantum coherence in biological conditions, to build microtubule structures or synaptic configurations or neural architectures that protect quantum states long enough to matter. Anesthesia provides perhaps the most striking evidence. General anesthesia eliminates consciousness completely. You are gone, not asleep, gone. No dreams, no awareness, no experience. The subjective world vanishes entirely, and then returns when the anesthetic wears off. What does anesthesia do? It does not stop neurons from firing, does not stop the brain from processing information, does not stop computational activity. It stops something else, something specific to consciousness. And Hameroff and Penrose argue it stops quantum coherence in microtubules. Anesthetic molecules bind to hydrophobic pockets in tubulin proteins, disrupt the quantum states, destroy the coherence, and consciousness vanishes, not because computation stopped, but because the quantum process underlying consciousness was disrupted. Remove the anesthetic, coherence returns. Consciousness returns. The correlation is precise. The mechanism is specific, and it points directly at quantum processes as the substrate of consciousness. If this is correct, the implications for quantum immortality are extraordinary, because Orch OR ties consciousness directly to quantum mechanics, makes consciousness a quantum process. And if consciousness is quantum process, then it is subject to quantum laws, including superposition, including branching, including the many worlds implications we explored in Part 1. But here is the twist. Penrose does not accept many worlds. He believes wave function collapse is real physical process. Objective reduction. not caused by observation but by gravity. When a superposition involves sufficient mass difference between its branches, gravity forces a collapse. Reality chooses. One outcome becomes real. The other ceases. No branching, no parallel universes, no quantum immortality. In Penrose's picture, consciousness is quantum, but the universe does not branch. Collapse is real. Death is real. The observer does not persist across branches because there are no branches. There is one reality, and in that reality you die. This is the tension at the heart of quantum immortality. The interpretation of quantum mechanics you accept determines whether immortality follows. Many worlds, no collapse branches are real, consciousness persists. Copenhagen collapse is real. Branches do not exist. Consciousness ends with the body. Penrose. Objective reduction. Collapse is gravitational. Consciousness is quantum, but mortal. Each interpretation is consistent with all experimental data. Each makes identical predictions for every experiment we can perform. They differ only in what they say about the nature of reality behind the experiments. And that nature determines whether you are immortal or not. Your fate depends on which interpretation is correct. And we cannot determine which interpretation is correct. Not with current technology, perhaps not ever. There is another quantum phenomenon relevant here, the quantum Zeno effect, named after Zeno of Elea, who argued that motion is impossible because at any instant an arrow is at rest and a collection of rests cannot produce motion. The quantum Zeno effect is analogous. If you observe a quantum system frequently enough, it cannot change state. A radioactive atom watched continuously will never decay. An unstable particle measured repeatedly will never transition. Observation freezes the system, prevents evolution, locks reality in place. This is experimentally confirmed. In 1977, Baidyanath Misra and George Sudarshan predicted it. In 1990, Wayne Itano and colleagues at NIST demonstrated it. Continuous observation prevents quantum transitions. The watched pot literally never boils in quantum mechanics. What does this mean for consciousness? If consciousness is a form of continuous self-observation, if the brain is constantly measuring its own quantum states, then the quantum Zeno effect might stabilize consciousness, might prevent the quantum transitions that would lead to unconsciousness or death, might lock the conscious state in place by the very act of being conscious. Consciousness observing itself, preventing itself from decohering, from dissolving, from ending. Not quantum immortality through branching, but quantum immortality through observation, through the Zeno effect, through consciousness stabilizing itself by watching itself. This is speculative, highly speculative. No experimental evidence supports it directly, but it adds another quantum mechanism by which consciousness might persist, not through branching into surviving branches, but through preventing the quantum transitions that lead to death. Consciousness as its own preservation mechanism, the observer protecting itself from the observations that would end it. A quantum feedback loop of survival, self-sustaining awareness, self-preserving consciousness. And this echoes something theological, the concept of divine self-sustenance, God as the being that sustains itself. That requires no external support. That exists by its own nature, aseity, self-existence, the property of existing through oneself. If consciousness uses the quantum Zeno effect to sustain itself, then consciousness has a form of aseity, self-sustenance through self-observation, existence maintained by the act of existing. This is not God, but it is godlike, a property traditionally attributed only to the divine appearing in the physics of consciousness. This should unsettle you. The question of whether you survive death might be empirically undecidable, not because we lack information, but because the universe might not provide a way to distinguish between interpretations from within. We are inside the system. We cannot step outside to check whether branches exist. cannot verify from within a branch whether other branches are real. The question of your immortality might be permanently beyond the reach of experiment, permanently undecidable, permanently a matter of interpretation rather than fact. But let us assume many worlds is correct. Let us follow the logic to see where it leads. If consciousness propagates through branches, if the observer always finds itself in a surviving branch, what does this look like from the inside? What does quantum immortality feel like? It might feel like luck, extraordinary luck. You survive a car accident that should have killed you. Lucky. You recover from a disease that kills most people. Lucky. The bullet missed a vital organ by millimeters. Lucky. Over a lifetime you accumulate near misses. Close calls, brushes with death that somehow went your way. Each one individually improbable, collectively almost impossible, but you are still here, still alive, still conscious, and in the branches where luck ran out, other people mourn you, other versions of your family bury you, other versions of your friends remember you, but you do not experience those branches. You experience only the branches where you survived, where luck held, where the improbable happened. Think about this from the perspective of everyone around you. They see you age, they see you get sick, they see you almost die, and then they see you recover, again and again. From their perspective, you are lucky, remarkably lucky, disturbingly lucky. They attend funerals of friends who died from the same disease you survived. They mourn relatives who did not survive the same surgery you recovered from. And they look at you and wonder how you keep going. But they do not wonder for long, because in their branch, their version of them also benefits from the same observer selection. They too are always surviving in the branches where they have consciousness to notice their survival. They too are accumulating improbable luck. Every conscious being in a many worlds universe is the survivor of their own personal chain of near misses. Every consciousness is the lucky one, in its own branch, by its own measure, and as you age, the luck must increase. Because the probability of survival decreases with age, the body deteriorates, entropy accumulates, the quantum events required for survival become increasingly unlikely. More and more branches contain your death, fewer and fewer contain your survival. The surviving branches become exotic, improbable, strange. Perhaps in the surviving branches, medical breakthroughs occur just in time. Perhaps aging is cured just before you would have died. Perhaps some technological intervention extends your life in ways that seem miraculous from the perspective of branches where those breakthroughs did not occur. The further along the probability tree you go, the more extraordinary the surviving branches become, the more unlikely your continued existence. The more your branch diverges from the typical branch, you become outlier, anomaly, the person who keeps not dying in a universe that keeps trying to kill them. This has a disturbing implication. Quantum immortality does not promise quality of life, only continuation of consciousness. You might survive but in degraded state, brain damaged, comatose, barely conscious. The minimum consciousness required to count as an observer. The theory says you always find yourself in a surviving branch. It does not say you find yourself healthy, happy, or whole, just alive, just conscious enough to be conscious. The immortality might be torment, endless degradation, consciousness trapped in failing body, in improbable branch, unable to die, unable to recover. A kind of hell produced not by divine punishment but by quantum mechanics, by the mathematics of branching and observer selection. Unless consciousness has a threshold, unless there is a minimum level of quantum coherence or neural activity below which consciousness ceases and the observer selection effect stops working. If you fall below the threshold, you are no longer observer, no longer selecting branches, no longer immune to death. You simply cease. in all branches simultaneously. Because in no branch is there sufficient consciousness to continue the selection. This would limit quantum immortality, would prevent the worst-case scenario of eternal degradation, would provide a floor below which death finally occurs. But we do not know where this floor is, do not know if it exists, do not know what minimum conditions consciousness requires. Because we do not know what consciousness is, the hard problem again. Everything returns to the hard problem. There is another difficulty: identity. Even if consciousness persists across branches, is it your consciousness? Are you the same person in a branch where different quantum events occurred in your brain? Every thought you have involves quantum events. Every memory involves quantum processes at the molecular level. The quantum events in your neurons right now are determining which branch you will find yourself in next. And different quantum events produce different neural states, different thoughts, different memories, different decisions. The version of you in one branch thinks one thing. The version in another branch thinks something else. Are they the same person? Is identity preserved across branching, or does branching destroy identity? Does the you that survives in an improbable branch with different quantum brain states share enough with the you in this branch to count as the same person? This is the problem of personal identity applied to quantum mechanics, and it has no easy answer. If identity is defined by continuity of memory, then branching might preserve identity if memories are preserved. But quantum events in the brain alter memories. Every branch has slightly different memory formation. Over time, the versions diverge. The you in a distant branch might share your memories from before the branching, but have accumulated different memories since, like identical twins who share childhood but diverge as adults. Same starting point, different trajectories, same person, different people. The question has no objective answer. It depends on what you mean by same person. And quantum mechanics does not tell you what to mean. There is a thought experiment that makes this vivid. Imagine tonight while you sleep, a quantum event in your brain branches the universe. In one branch, a particular memory is consolidated. In another branch, a slightly different version of that memory forms. You wake up in one branch, your copy wakes up in the other. Both remember going to sleep. Both feel continuous with yesterday. Both identify as you, but they have subtly different memories, and from this moment forward they will diverge further. One will have a thought the other does not. One will notice something the other misses. One will make a decision the other would not. Within hours, the two yous are noticeably different. Within days, significantly different. Within months, they are as different as close siblings. Within years, they are strangers. Both started as you. Neither is any longer the you that went to sleep. You did not survive the night. Two new people emerged from your branching consciousness, each believing itself to be the original, each wrong. This happens every moment, not just during sleep. Right now, the quantum events in your brain are branching reality. The you of this moment is spawning multiple yous of the next moment. You are not a single thread moving through time. You are a fraying rope, splitting into filaments, each filament believing it is the whole rope, each wrong. You have never been one person for more than an instant. You have been branching from the first quantum event in your first neuron. The self you believe in, the continuous I, has never existed. Only the illusion of continuity created by each branch inheriting the memories of its predecessor and mistaking inheritance for identity. Derek Parfit, the philosopher, argued that personal identity is not what matters, that what matters is psychological continuity and connectedness, and that these come in degrees. You are strongly connected to yourself yesterday, weakly connected to yourself 30 years ago. The connection fades with time, and branching is like accelerated time. The branches diverge. The connections weaken. You are somewhat the same person in a nearby branch, barely the same person in a distant branch, not the same person at all in a very distant branch. Identity dissolves across branches. What persists is not a self, but a family of selves, a lineage of consciousnesses, related but not identical, connected but diverging. If Parfit is right, then quantum immortality does not preserve you. It preserves something related to you. Something that started as you, but became something else, through branching and quantum divergence. Your lineage continues. Your exact self does not. You survive in the same sense that your genes survive in your children. Something of you persists, but it is not you. Not the specific pattern of memories and personality and experience that you identify as yourself. That pattern exists only in this branch, in this moment, and the next moment it has already changed, already branched, already become multiple patterns, each claiming to be you, each experiencing itself as continuous, each unaware of the others. This is perhaps the deepest implication of quantum mechanics for personal identity, that the self is not what you think it is, not a continuous entity persisting through time, but a branching tree of moments, each connected to the previous, each spawning the next. Not a line, but a tree. Not a river, but a delta. Not a single story, but an infinite library of stories, all starting from the same first page, but diverging into different narratives with different endings. And no story is more real than any other. No branch is the true branch. No self is the true self. All are equally real. All are equally you. And none is uniquely you. This resonates with something ancient, something that Buddhist philosophy has taught for 2,500 years, the doctrine of anatta, no self. The teaching that the self is illusion, that what you call I is not a thing but a process, not an entity but a pattern, not a noun but a verb. You are not a being, you are a becoming, a constant flow of moments each giving rise to the next. No fixed core, no permanent essence, no self that persists unchanged from birth to death. Just process, just flow, just the river that is never the same river. Quantum mechanics seems to confirm this. The branching wave function produces not a self, but a process of selves, a flow of consciousnesses branching and diverging. No fixed identity, no permanent observer, just the ongoing process of observation, branching into multiple ongoing processes of observation, the Buddhist insight that self is illusion, and the quantum mechanical insight that observers branch are structurally identical. Both deny the fixed self, both describe consciousness as process rather than entity. Both suggest that what you call I is convenient fiction, useful approximation, necessary for everyday life but not ultimately real. The Hindu tradition offers a different perspective that is equally relevant. The Bhagavad Gita says, the self cannot be cut by weapons, cannot be burned by fire, cannot be wetted by water, cannot be dried by wind. The Atman is indestructible, not because it is tough, because it is not material, not because it is strong, because it is not the kind of thing that can be destroyed. It does not have parts to be disassembled, does not have structure to be disrupted, does not have form to be broken. It is formless awareness, pure consciousness without content. The light that illuminates experience without being any particular experience. And this formless awareness cannot die because it was never born, cannot end because it never began. It simply is, eternal, unchanging, while everything around it changes, and quantum mechanics offers an echo of this. The observer in quantum formalism is not a physical system, it is the point from which physical systems are described. It is not inside the equations. It is what gives the equations meaning. Not a thing in the wave function, but the perspective from which the wave function is evaluated. You cannot find the observer in the mathematics of quantum mechanics any more than you can find the reader in the text of a novel. The observer is outside the formalism. necessary for the formalism to work, but not described by it, not contained in it, not subject to it. If the observer is not subject to quantum mechanics, then the observer is not subject to the processes quantum mechanics describes, including death, including decoherence, including the branching of the wave function. The observer transcends the physics it observes, is not constrained by the laws it uses to describe nature. This is a radical claim. Most physicists would reject it, would say the observer is a physical system like any other, made of atoms, described by equations, subject to the same laws as everything else. But the measurement problem persists precisely because this assumption fails, because treating the observer as ordinary physical system produces paradoxes. Schrödinger's cat, Wigner's friend. The infinite regress of observers observing observers. The measurement problem is the universe telling us that the observer is not ordinary physical system. That something about consciousness does not fit within the framework of quantum mechanics. That the observer might be what the Hindus always said it was. Something outside the system. Something not subject to the system's rules. Something that cannot be destroyed by the processes it observes. And if the self is not ultimately real, then what does quantum immortality preserve? Not a self, a process, not an identity, an ongoing pattern of consciousness. Not you, but the process of being you, continuing in some branches, ending in others, but the process never fully stopping, always continuing somewhere. In some branch, the process that started as you continues, changed, diverged, becomes something you would not recognize as yourself, but still the same process, still consciousness, still the inner light, still the hard problem in action, still something it is like to be. Perhaps this is enough. Perhaps the continuation of consciousness, even without the continuation of identity, is what quantum immortality offers. Not personal survival in the way religion promises. Not the same you waking up in heaven with your memories intact and your personality preserved, but the continuation of the process of experience, the inner light persisting even as the self dissolves. Consciousness without identity, experience without experiencer, awareness without the specific pattern you call yourself. This is what the deepest physics and the deepest philosophy and the deepest theology converge on. Not personal immortality, but the immortality of consciousness itself. Not your survival, but the survival of the capacity to experience. Not the persistence of the self, but the persistence of the light that the self mistakes for itself. And whether this light is quantum process or divine spark or mathematical necessity or all three remains the question we carry forward. And perhaps the distinction between personal immortality and the immortality of consciousness is the most important insight of all. Every religion promises personal survival. You will live again. You will see your loved ones. You will remember. You will be you. Quantum immortality might offer something different, something more abstract, something less comforting, but perhaps more true. Not that you survive, but that consciousness survives. That the process of awareness continues even as the particular self dissolves. That the light persists even as the lamp changes form. That what is essential about you is not the specific memories and personality and history you identify with, but the bare fact of awareness itself, the capacity to experience, the inner light, the thing that makes it like something to be something. And this might be what theology has always meant by soul. Not the personality, not the memories, not the ego, but the awareness underlying all of these. The witness, the observer, the consciousness that remains when everything else is stripped away. Every mystical tradition describes this stripping, the dark night of the soul, the ego death, the dissolution of self. And what remains after the dissolution is not nothing, is awareness itself, pure, formless, indestructible, not because it is made of strong material, but because it is not made of material at all. It is the space in which material appears, the screen on which the movie plays, and the screen does not die when the movie ends. It waits for the next movie, in the next branch, in the next configuration, in the next expression of what consciousness can be. Into part 3, where we confront the relationship between quantum immortality and God, where we ask whether the mathematics that preserves consciousness is designed or accidental, whether the wave function that never collapses is divine creation or brute physical fact, whether the observer that cannot die is soul by another name, and whether the universe that branches to preserve consciousness is the work of a creator who wanted consciousness to persist, or whether it is mindless mechanism that happens to produce immortality as unintended side effect. The question of God returns, as it always does, at the deepest level of every question worth asking. Does the universe want you to be conscious? This is not a scientific question. Science does not deal in want, does not attribute desire to physical systems, does not assign purpose to mathematical laws. The universe does not want anything. It is mechanism. It is equation. It is process without intention. This is the foundational assumption of modern physics, and quantum mechanics might be undermining it. Consider what we have established. The quantum vacuum creates from nothing, continuously, at every point. The laws of physics are fine-tuned to permit complex structures. The cosmological constant is calibrated to 123 decimal places to allow galaxies and stars and planets. The Higgs field has exactly the vacuum expectation value needed for chemistry to work. The strong force coupling constant has exactly the value needed for protons to be stable. Carbon is synthesized in stars only because of a specific nuclear resonance that Fred Hoyle predicted must exist before it was discovered, because without it, carbon-based life would be impossible. And now, quantum mechanics in its many worlds interpretation provides a mechanism by which consciousness, once it emerges, is preserved indefinitely across all branches. The universe creates the conditions for consciousness, fine-tunes those conditions with incredible precision, and then provides a mathematical framework that prevents consciousness from being permanently destroyed. This is either the greatest sequence of coincidences in the history of existence, or it is evidence that consciousness is not accident, not side effect, not unintended consequence of physics running its course, but the point, the purpose, the thing the universe is structured to produce and preserve, not because the universe has conscious intent, but because the mathematical structure of reality is such that consciousness inevitably emerges and inevitably persists, as if the laws were chosen to guarantee it, as if the equations were designed to produce minds, as if the fine-tuning and the branching and the vacuum energy and the cosmological constant and the nuclear resonances and the quantum coherence in biological systems all point to a single conclusion. Reality is optimized for consciousness. The anthropic principle attempts to address this without invoking God. The weak anthropic principle says we observe the universe to have properties compatible with our existence, because if it had different properties, we would not exist to observe it. This is tautology, true but uninformative. Like saying, the reason you won the lottery is that only winners notice they won. Correct but not explanatory. The strong anthropic principle goes further, says the universe must have properties that permit conscious life. Must. Not as logical necessity, but as observational fact elevated to principle. The universe is this way because it must be this way for us to be asking why it is this way. This is circular, logically valid but philosophically empty. It does not explain, it describes. And the description is that the universe happens to be exactly right for consciousness, which is what needed explaining in the first place. John Archibald Wheeler proposed the participatory anthropic principle, the most radical version. The universe requires observers to exist, not just permits observers, requires them. Because in quantum mechanics, reality is not definite until observed. The wave function does not collapse until measured. And if collapse requires consciousness, then the universe requires consciousness to become real. Without observers, the universe remains in superposition, indefinite, unreal, a ghost of possibilities never actualized. Consciousness collapses the wave function, makes reality definite, gives the universe substance. And the universe in turn creates consciousness through evolution and fine-tuning. The loop closes. The universe creates consciousness. Consciousness creates the universe. Neither exists without the other. Both require both. This is Wheeler's self-excited circuit. The participatory universe, reality, bootstrapping itself into existence through the mutual dependence of physics and consciousness. Wheeler drew a famous diagram, a large U, one end representing the Big Bang, the other end representing a conscious observer. The observer at one end of the U looks back at the other end. And the act of looking, the act of observation, reaches back in time and gives reality to the universe that produced the observer. The universe existed in quantum superposition for 13.8 billion years, unobserved, indefinite. And then consciousness emerged. And consciousness, looking back at the cosmic microwave background, at the distribution of galaxies, at the fine-tuning of constants, collapsed the universal wave function, made the past definite, gave the universe its history retroactively. The observer does not just exist in the universe. The observer creates the universe by observing it, including the parts of the universe that existed before the observer. This is delayed choice on a cosmic scale. Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, proven in the laboratory, applied to the entire cosmos. The observer choosing now which path the photon took billions of years ago, consciousness reaching backward in time to determine the past that produced it. This is not metaphor. Wheeler meant it literally, and it has experimental support. The delayed choice quantum eraser experiment demonstrates that measurements made now can determine the quantum state of particles in the past. The future affects the past in quantum mechanics, not through time travel, through the entangled structure of the wave function. If this applies cosmically, then consciousness emerging now determines the quantum state of the universe in the past. The fine-tuning is not set at the Big Bang. The fine-tuning is set by observation now, by consciousness now. The universe is fine-tuned because consciousness observing it now requires fine-tuning, and the observation reaches back to ensure the tuning was always there. If Wheeler is right, then quantum immortality is not just consequence of many worlds. It is requirement of the participatory universe. Because if the universe needs consciousness to exist, then the universe cannot allow consciousness to permanently cease. If all conscious observers died permanently, the universe would lose its observers, would revert to indefinite wave function, would become unreal. The universe's existential stake in the persistence of consciousness. Not emotional stake, not caring stake, mathematical stake. The equations require observers. The equations cannot work without measurement. Measurement requires consciousness. Therefore, the equations preserve consciousness, not through miracle, through mathematical necessity. The universe is structured to prevent the permanent extinction of awareness, because without awareness, the universe has no structure. This is speculative, profoundly speculative. Most physicists would reject it, would say the wave function does not need conscious observers to collapse, would say decoherence handles collapse without consciousness, would say the universe was real for 13.8 billion years before consciousness evolved, would say Wheeler's participatory principle is beautiful but unsupported, and they might be right. Decoherence might be sufficient. Consciousness might be unnecessary for physical reality. The universe might not need us, and quantum immortality might be just a curious logical implication of many worlds with no deeper significance. But there is something uncomfortable about dismissing it entirely, because the fine-tuning is real. The coincidences are real. The mathematical structure that preserves consciousness in many worlds is real. And the alternative to purpose is accident. An accident at this scale strains credibility. One coincidence is unremarkable. 2 are notable, 3 are suspicious. The number of precise calibrations required for consciousness to exist and persist in this universe is not 3. It is dozens, perhaps hundreds, each one independently unlikely, together statistically impossible without either infinite universes or design. The multiverse is the standard scientific escape from design. If there are 10 to the 500 universes with different physical constants, then every combination exists somewhere. Our universe is not fine-tuned. It is one random draw among unimaginably many. We observe this universe because only this universe permits observers. No design needed, just statistics, just probability, just the inevitable outcome of infinite trials. But the multiverse is not observed, not testable, not falsifiable. It is inferred, postulated to avoid the alternative, which is design. The multiverse is the scientific community's way of saying anything rather than God. This is not criticism. It might be correct. The multiverse might be real, but it is striking that the hypothesis was invented precisely to avoid the conclusion that the universe is designed for consciousness, that the lengths to which physics will go to avoid God are themselves evidence of how strongly the evidence points toward God. You do not construct elaborate alternatives to avoid a conclusion that no one finds plausible. You construct elaborate alternatives to avoid a conclusion that the evidence uncomfortably supports. And notice the irony. Many worlds, which is the foundation of quantum immortality, is itself a form of multiverse. The branching wave function creates multiple realities. So the very interpretation that gives us quantum immortality also gives us the multiverse that is supposed to explain away design. The two ideas are entangled, inseparable, born from the same mathematics. If many worlds is true, then both quantum immortality and the multiverse explanation of fine-tuning follow. You get consciousness preservation and the apparent absence of a designer from the same mathematical package. This creates a strange intellectual situation. The same physics simultaneously provides evidence for design through the remarkable preservation of consciousness and evidence against design through the multiverse that explains fine-tuning without a designer. The argument for God and the argument against God come from the same equation, from the same interpretation, from the same wave function, as if reality is structured to keep the question of God permanently open, permanently undecidable, permanently balanced between belief and doubt, as if the universe is designed to prevent us from ever knowing whether it is designed. Perhaps this too is design, a designer who wants free choice in belief, who does not force faith through obvious evidence, who creates a universe balanced precisely at the edge between theism and atheism, where the evidence points both ways equally, where honest, intelligent people can reasonably disagree, where the question of God is the deepest question that can be asked but never definitively answered. A God who hides in the equations, who reveals enough to inspire wonder but not enough to compel belief, who created quantum mechanics to be the most successful and the most mysterious theory in history, successful enough to prove the vacuum creates, mysterious enough to leave the creator of the vacuum unknown, unless the designer chose many worlds as the mathematical package, unless God designed reality to be a branching wave function precisely because branching preserves consciousness, in which case the multiverse is not alternative to design. The multiverse is the design, God's chosen architecture, the way God structured reality to ensure that consciousness always continues, that every possibility is explored, that no awareness is permanently extinguished. This is where honest physics meets theology, not in proof, not in demonstration, in discomfort, in the nagging sense that the coincidences are too precise, the calibrations too exact, the mathematical preservation of consciousness too convenient, in the feeling that the universe looks like it was made for minds, that physics keeps discovering features that seem designed to produce and preserve awareness. and that every naturalistic explanation for these features either pushes the question back or multiplies entities beyond necessity. Theology has a simpler explanation. God created the universe for consciousness, created the laws to produce minds, calibrated the constants to permit awareness, designed the mathematics to preserve the observers once they emerge. Not many worlds as accident, many worlds as divine architecture. The branching of the wave function not as mindless mathematical consequence, but as God's mechanism for ensuring that consciousness never permanently ceases, that the light never goes out, that the observers persist because the Creator wants them to persist. Consider the elegance of this design, if it is design. God does not need to intervene, does not need to perform miracles, does not need to reach into the universe and save individuals from death one at a time. The mathematics does it automatically. The wave function branches. Consciousness persists. No intervention required. No violation of natural law. No suspension of physics. The physics itself preserves consciousness. God wrote the equations and the equations do the work. This is not the God who parts seas and raises the dead through supernatural power. This is the God who created natural law so perfectly that the law itself achieves what miracles were supposed to achieve: preservation of consciousness, continuation of awareness, eternal life. Not despite physics, through physics, not against nature, as nature, and this God would be invisible, undetectable. Because the mechanism is natural, because the preservation looks like physics, not intervention. Because quantum immortality, if it operates, does so through the standard laws of quantum mechanics. No supernatural signature, no evidence of external manipulation, just the equations working as the equations work. A God who designed physics to preserve consciousness would leave no fingerprints, because the fingerprints would be the laws themselves. And the laws look natural, look self-sufficient, look like they need no designer. This is either the cleverest design in history, the design that is indistinguishable from no design, or it is no design, and we cannot tell which. This is not scientifically testable, not empirically verifiable, not the kind of claim physics can confirm or deny, but it is internally consistent. It explains the fine-tuning, explains the coincidences, explains why the mathematical structure of quantum mechanics happens to preserve consciousness, explains everything that physics describes but cannot explain why, and it does so with a single postulate: a conscious creator who designed reality for conscious beings. Occam's razor favors simplicity. One postulate versus 10 to the 500 unobserved universes. The simplest explanation for a universe that looks designed is that it was designed. But simplicity is not truth. The simplest explanation is not always correct. The Earth looks flat. It is not. The Sun looks like it revolves around the Earth. It does not. Appearances deceive. Design might be illusion. The universe might look purposeful without being purposeful. Human brains evolved to detect purpose and agency. We see faces in clouds, see intention in randomness, see God in equations. This might be cognitive bias, not cosmic truth. And yet the equations work. The fine-tuning is real. The preservation of consciousness in many worlds is mathematical fact, not cognitive bias. You can dismiss the interpretation. You cannot dismiss the mathematics. The universe is structured in a way that permits and preserves consciousness. This is not opinion. This is calculation. And whether the calculation implies design or accident or necessity or something we have no concept for is the question that separates physics from theology, the question that neither discipline can answer alone, the question that might require both. Consider what it would mean if quantum immortality is real and is designed. If God created a universe where consciousness cannot permanently cease, where the wave function branches to ensure that awareness always continues somewhere, this would mean death is not God's punishment or God's indifference. Death is local phenomenon, branch specific. The body dies in one branch, Consciousness continues in another. Death is real for observers in the death branch. They mourn, they grieve, they experience loss. But the consciousness that died in their branch did not actually cease. It continued elsewhere, in another branch, in another configuration. Death is separation, not annihilation. The grieving branch and the surviving branch can no longer communicate, cannot confirm that the other exists, but both exist. Both are real. Both are part of God's creation, if God exists. This reframes every religious teaching about death. Resurrection is not future event, it is present reality, continuous. The consciousness that appears to die is already alive in another branch, already resurrected, already continuing, not in heaven, not in another realm, in another branch of the same physical reality, governed by the same laws, made of the same matter. The afterlife is not supernatural, it is quantum mechanical, not above nature but beside nature, not beyond physics but within physics, a different branch of the same wave function. Consider what this means for grief, for the experience of losing someone you love. In this branch they are gone. Their body has ceased, their brain has stopped, their consciousness in this branch has ended. You mourn, you grieve, the loss is real, the pain is real, the absence is real. In this branch, but in another branch they continue. In another branch they are alive. In another branch the disease was cured, the accident was avoided, the heart kept beating. They exist, right now. As you grieve them in this branch, they are living in another branch, unaware that you are grieving, unaware that this branch exists, separated from you not by death but by decoherence, not by annihilation but by quantum isolation. They are not destroyed, they are unreachable, not ended, elsewhere. This does not eliminate grief. The separation is real. The inability to communicate across branches is absolute. They are as unreachable as if they were dead in the traditional sense. But the ontological status is different. The person you mourn exists, not existed, exists, present tense. In another branch of the wave function, alive, conscious, experiencing. The grief is for separation, not annihilation, for distance, not destruction. This is different from traditional death. This changes the texture of loss, not its pain but its meaning. They are not gone, they are elsewhere, not nothing, somewhere. And if you too persist across branches, if your consciousness continues after your apparent death in some branches, then reunion is possible, not guaranteed, not in the same branch necessarily. But in the universal wave function which contains all branches, your consciousness and theirs both persist, both continue, both exist. The wave function contains branches where you meet again, where the quantum events conspire to bring together consciousnesses that were separated by death in other branches. Reunion is not guaranteed in any particular branch, but it is inevitable in the wave function as a whole. Somewhere in the infinite tree of branching reality, every consciousness that persists eventually shares branches with every other consciousness that persists. This is not promise, this is mathematics. This is what infinite branching implies. And the soul. What theology calls the soul might be what physics calls the observer, the conscious entity that persists across branches. That cannot be permanently destroyed. That transcends any particular body, any particular brain. The soul is not supernatural substance. It is the pattern of consciousness that propagates through the wave function, that always finds itself in a surviving branch, that experiences continuity even as bodies die. The soul is the thread of awareness that runs through the branching tree of reality, never broken, never terminated, always continuing, in some branch, in some form, through some configuration of matter that supports consciousness. This is not traditional theology. No theologian would recognize this as orthodox doctrine. The soul in Christianity is created by God, individual and personal, destined for judgment and eternal life or damnation. The soul in quantum immortality is mathematical consequence of the wave function, impersonal, subject to no judgment, continuing automatically without divine intervention. These are very different concepts, sharing a structural similarity. Both describe something that survives physical death, but they disagree about almost everything else. Unless God designed the wave function specifically to produce the mathematical consequence we call quantum immortality, unless the automatic impersonal mathematical continuation of consciousness is exactly what God intended, unless the mechanism is the design, unless the physics is the theology, unless God chose to preserve consciousness not through supernatural intervention but through the natural mathematical structure of quantum reality, embedding immortality in the equations rather than imposing it from outside, making persistence a law rather than a miracle, building survival into the fabric of space and time rather than granting it as special grace. This would be a God who works through mathematics, through physics, through natural law. Not a God of miracles, but a God of design. Not a God who intervenes, but a God who builds the intervention into the structure. Not a God who saves from the outside, but a God who created reality such that salvation is automatic. Built in, mathematical, as inevitable as the Casimir force, as unavoidable as zero-point energy, as guaranteed as the uncertainty principle. Consciousness persists because the equations say it must, and the equations say it must because the designer wrote them that way. This is consistent with what we have seen throughout this series. The quantum vacuum creates from nothing through mathematical necessity. The Higgs field gives mass through automatic process. Virtual particles sustain atoms through continuous activity. The universe does not require constant divine intervention. It runs on its own, on the equations, on the laws, on the mathematical structure embedded at the beginning. And if quantum immortality is part of this structure, then the preservation of consciousness is not miracle but feature, not grace but design, not exception but rule. Built into reality the same way gravity is built into reality, the same way electromagnetism is built into reality. Consciousness persists because the designer engineered it that way, because the architect of the equations included consciousness preservation in the blueprint, not as afterthought, as foundation, as the reason for the blueprint. This is the God of Einstein, not the personal God who answers prayers and judges sins, but the God who created the laws, who chose the mathematics, who designed the structure, who embedded purpose in the equations without requiring ongoing supervision. A God of elegant design, not continuous intervention. A God who set the wave function in motion and let it branch and trusted that the mathematics would preserve what needed preserving. Consciousness, awareness, the inner light, the capacity to ask why, the ability to contemplate the equations and recognize the design, or the absence of design. The God who created a universe where the question of God can be asked but never definitively answered. A God of mystery by design. And there is a profound theological implication here that most discussions of quantum immortality miss entirely. If consciousness is preserved across all branches, if every version of you that can survive does survive, then free will acquires a new dimension. Every choice you make, every decision, every moral act creates branches. In some branches you choose wisely, in others you choose foolishly. In some branches you are kind, in others you are cruel. All branches are real, all choices are made. All versions of you exist. You are simultaneously the saint and the sinner, the hero and the coward, the person who helped and the person who turned away. Every moral possibility is actualized in some branch. This seems to destroy moral responsibility. If every choice is made in some branch, then no choice is meaningful. You did not choose to be good. A version of you was good, and another version was bad, and both are equally real. Free will becomes illusion. Morality becomes meaningless. Or does it? Consider more carefully. The branch where you choose kindness is experienced by a consciousness. That consciousness feels the choice, feels the warmth of compassion, feels the rightness of the act. And the branch where you choose cruelty is experienced by a different consciousness. That consciousness feels the choice, feels the coldness, feels the wrongness. Both experiences are real, but they are not the same experience. The consciousness in the kind branch has a different quality of existence than the consciousness in the cruel branch. Different not in physical circumstance, but in subjective texture, in the felt quality of being. The kind consciousness lives in a kinder inner world. The cruel consciousness lives in a harsher inner world, not as punishment from outside, as consequence from inside, as the natural result of what kind of consciousness you become through your choices. And this is moral responsibility in its deepest form. Not responsibility to external judge, not responsibility to divine law. Responsibility to your own consciousness, to the quality of your own awareness. Your choices determine not what happens to you, but what you become, which branch of yourself you strengthen, which version of consciousness you cultivate. In the branch where you practice compassion repeatedly, you become deeply compassionate consciousness. In the branch where you practice cruelty, you become deeply cruel consciousness. Both persist, both continue, but they are not the same quality of continuing. One is heaven, the other is hell, not places, states of consciousness, not destinations, qualities of awareness, created by your choices, experienced by your consciousness, in your branch, forever. This is karma, not as superstition, not as cosmic accounting, as quantum mechanics. Your actions branch reality. Your choices determine which branch you continue in. Your moral quality determines the quality of consciousness you experience going forward. Not because the universe punishes or rewards, because you are creating yourself through your choices, branch by branch, decision by decision, becoming what you repeatedly choose to be, and continuing as what you have become, across branches, indefinitely. Quantum immortality preserves not just consciousness, but the kind of consciousness you have built, the moral architecture of your awareness, the heaven or hell you have constructed inside yourself through a lifetime of choices. This echoes the Islamic concept of divine names. In Islamic theology, God has 99 names. Each name represents a divine attribute: the merciful, the just, the creator, the destroyer, the giver of life, the giver of death. These attributes seem contradictory. How can God be both merciful and just, both creator and destroyer, both giver of life and giver of death? Islamic theology says each attribute is manifested in different contexts. Different situations reveal different divine names, and the totality of all manifestations of all names is the complete expression of divine nature. No single manifestation is sufficient. No single context reveals the whole. Only the totality, the sum of all manifestations across all contexts, expresses God fully. The many worlds wave function mirrors this precisely. Each branch manifests a different possibility, a different outcome, a different expression of what reality can be. In one branch, mercy dominates. In another, justice. In one branch, creation flourishes. In another, destruction prevails. In one branch, life extends improbably. In another, death arrives suddenly. And the totality of all branches, the complete wave function, is the full expression of what is possible, what consciousness can be, what choices can be made, what experiences can be had. If God created the wave function, then God created all branches, all possibilities, all outcomes. The totality is the creation, not any single branch. And the totality is complete in a way no single branch can be, contains mercy and justice, creation and destruction, life and death, all the divine names expressed across the full tree of branching reality. The Sufi tradition goes even further. Ibn Arabi, the great Sufi philosopher of the 12th century, described the universe as the mirror of God. God creates the universe to see God's own nature reflected. Each creature, each object, each event is a reflection of a divine attribute. The universe is not separate from God. The universe is God's self-revelation, God's way of knowing God's own nature through manifestation. And the more diverse the manifestation, the more complete the self-knowledge. The more branches, the more possibilities, the more outcomes, the more God sees of God. Many worlds is the ultimate Sufi mirror, not one universe reflecting God, not one timeline expressing divine nature, but an infinite branching tree of universes, each reflecting a different possibility, each manifesting a different attribute, each revealing a different face of what reality can be. The wave function is God's complete mirror, the totality of all reflections, the full revelation, nothing left hidden, nothing unexpressed, every possibility actualized, every potential realized, every name manifested, in some branch somewhere. This is a God bigger than any single theology imagines. Not the God who judges individual choices in a single timeline, but the God who created every possible timeline so that every possible choice could be explored. Not the God who saves some and damns others, but the God who created a reality where every version of every person exists and every version experiences the consequences of its choices. Judgment is not external. Judgment is experiential. You experience the consequences of your choices in your branch. Every version of you experiences the consequences of its choices in its branch. The universe is self-judging, self-correcting, complete, and consciousness persists through all of it, through every branch, through every choice, through every consequence, never ending, never ceasing, always continuing, in some form, in some branch, in some expression. The light does not go out, the observer does not cease. The awareness that is the deepest thing in you, the thing that is more you than your name, or your memories, or your personality, that awareness continues. Because the mathematics requires it, because the wave function preserves it, because the design, if it is design, ensures it, because the accident, if it is accident, guarantees it. Either way, consciousness continues. And whether this is God's will or the universe's indifference, the result is the same. You do not end. Something in you does not end. The question is what that something is and what it means and whether it matters. These questions await us in part 4, the final part, where we confront the meaning of quantum immortality. Not the physics, not the theology, the meaning. What does it mean to live if you cannot die? What does it mean to choose if every choice is made? What does it mean to love if separation is branch-specific and reunion might be quantum mechanically inevitable? What does it mean to be human in a universe that might be designed to preserve the most human thing about you? Your awareness, your consciousness, your light. What does it mean to live if you cannot die? This question has haunted every civilization that imagined immortality. The Greeks told the story of Tithonus, loved by the goddess Eos, who asked Zeus to grant him eternal life. Zeus agreed, but Eos forgot to ask for eternal youth. Tithonus lived forever and aged forever. His body withered, his mind degraded, his skin dried to parchment, his voice became a thin, endless whine. He begged for death. Death would not come. He was immortal. And immortality was his punishment, not his gift. The Greeks understood something about eternal life that modern fantasies forget. Immortality without purpose is torture. Continuation without meaning is hell. Living forever is not the same as living well. And the question quantum immortality forces us to ask is not whether consciousness continues, but whether continuous consciousness has value, whether persistence is gift or curse, whether the mathematics that might preserve your awareness is saving you or trapping you. Every religion that promises eternal life also promises meaning. Heaven is not just continuation, it is fulfillment, purpose, joy, union with God, reunion with the beloved, the end of suffering, the beginning of understanding. Eternal life in every religious tradition is paired with eternal meaning. You do not just live forever, you live forever in a state of perfect realization, of cosmic understanding, of love without limit, consciousness without suffering, awareness without confusion. This is the promise, not mere persistence, but transformed persistence. Glorified. Continuation. Life not just extended but perfected. Quantum immortality promises none of this. It promises only continuation, only the persistence of consciousness across branches, with no guarantee of quality, no guarantee of understanding, no guarantee of joy. The consciousness that continues might be confused, might be suffering, might be degraded, might be trapped in a body that barely functions in a branch so improbable that nothing makes sense. Quantum immortality is immortality stripped of meaning. Continuation without purpose, persistence without promise. The mathematics preserves consciousness. It does not ennoble it, unless meaning is not given from outside, unless meaning is not feature of the universe but feature of consciousness itself. Unless the capacity to create meaning is built into awareness the way the capacity to observe is built into awareness. Unless consciousness does not need external meaning because consciousness is meaning. This is the existential response, not the theological response, not the scientific response, the human response, to a universe that might preserve you forever without telling you why. Albert Camus explored this territory. In the myth of Sisyphus, he described the absurd hero. Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a hill for eternity. The boulder always rolls back. The task never ends. The labor is meaningless. There is no purpose, no progress, no completion, just endless repetition. This is quantum immortality without meaning. Consciousness continuing forever without purpose. Awareness persisting without point. The inner light burning with nothing to illuminate. But Camus says we must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because the task has meaning, because Sisyphus creates meaning through his engagement with the task, through his refusal to surrender, through his consciousness of the absurdity. The awareness of meaninglessness becomes itself a form of meaning. The rebellion against purposelessness becomes purpose, not given from outside, generated from within, by consciousness itself, by the thing that cannot stop creating even when there is nothing to create from. Nietzsche proposed the eternal recurrence, the thought experiment that asks whether you would choose to live your exact life again. Every moment, every pain, every joy, every boredom, every loss, repeated infinitely, forever. Nietzsche said this was the heaviest thought, the thought that separates those who affirm life from those who deny it. The person who can say yes to eternal recurrence has achieved amor fati, love of fate, love of existence as it is, not as you wish it were, but as it actually is, including the suffering, including the loss, including the death, including everything. Quantum immortality is not eternal recurrence. You do not live the same life again. You live different lives across different branches, but the challenge is similar. Can you affirm existence knowing it might continue indefinitely? Can you say yes to consciousness knowing it might never end? Can you love the fact of awareness, knowing the fact of awareness might be permanent? Not just this life. All possible lives, all possible branches, all possible versions of you. Can you affirm the totality? can you love the wave function? Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, wrote about it in Man's Search for Meaning. His central insight was that meaning is not found, it is created, not given by circumstances but chosen by consciousness, not dependent on conditions but generated by the mind that refuses to surrender to conditions. In the worst possible circumstances, in a death camp surrounded by meaningless suffering, Frankl discovered that the last human freedom is the freedom to choose your attitude, to choose meaning, to create purpose from nothing. This sounds like the quantum vacuum, creating something from nothing. Not particles but meaning, not matter but purpose. Consciousness doing what the vacuum does, generating reality from void. Except the reality consciousness generates is not physical, it is existential, it is meaning itself. If Frankl is right, then quantum immortality is not curse, it is opportunity. Infinite opportunity. To create meaning, to choose purpose, to generate value from the raw material of experience regardless of circumstances, in every branch, in every configuration, in every state of consciousness, no matter how degraded or improbable. The capacity to create meaning persists as long as consciousness persists. And if consciousness persists indefinitely, then the capacity to create meaning persists indefinitely. Quantum immortality gives you forever to find meaning, or to create it, or to become it. But this is hard, harder than it sounds, because meaning requires stakes, requires consequences, requires the possibility of loss. A game with no possibility of losing is not a game. A story with no possibility of tragedy is not a story. A life with no possibility of ending is not a life in the way we understand life. Death gives life weight. Mortality gives choices, consequence. The fact that your time is limited makes your time precious. Remove the limit, and you remove the preciousness. This is the immortality paradox. The thing that makes life meaningful is the thing immortality eliminates. Death. Or does it? Consider more carefully what quantum immortality actually implies. You do not experience immortality. You do not know you are immortal. From your subjective perspective, you are mortal. You age. You get sick. You fear death. You experience every moment as if it could be your last, because from within your branch it could be. You do not know that other branches exist where you survive. You do not experience the branching. You experience only your branch, your timeline, your story, and in your story you are mortal. You will die. Someday. Probably. As far as you know, the immortality is objective, not subjective. From God's perspective, if God exists from the perspective of the universal wave function, consciousness continues across branches. But from your perspective, from inside your branch, you are mortal. You experience mortality. You feel its weight. You know its urgency. Your choices have consequence because in your branch they have consequence. The existence of other branches where different choices were made does not diminish the reality of your choice here. You experience this branch, this choice, this consequence, this life, and this life ends. In this branch, for you. This means quantum immortality does not actually remove the stakes, does not eliminate the weight, does not destroy meaning, because you do not experience immortality. You experience a mortal life, complete with fear and urgency and consequence and the preciousness that comes from knowing your time is limited. The immortality operates behind the scenes, below the level of experience, in the mathematics, in the wave function, in the branching that you never perceive. Your life has all the weight of mortality because from the inside it is a mortal life. The fact that consciousness continues in other branches does not register in your experience, does not lighten the load, does not remove the fear. You live as if you will die, and that as if gives your life everything it needs. Purpose, urgency, meaning, weight. Think about what this means practically. You wake up tomorrow morning, you have 24 hours. You do not know if quantum immortality is real. You do not experience branching. You experience one day, one set of choices, one sequence of moments. And every one of those moments matters because from the inside, this is the only life you have, the only branch you know, the only version of yourself you experience. The theoretical existence of other branches is irrelevant to how this day feels. This day feels mortal. This day feels precious. This day feels like it counts. And it does count, not despite quantum immortality, because of it. If quantum immortality is real, then your choices in this branch determine the quality of consciousness that continues along this branch line. Your kindness, your courage, your love, your attention, your care, all of it shapes the quality of awareness that persists. You are not just living a life. You are cultivating a consciousness, building an inner world, creating the felt quality of your own awareness through every choice, every thought, every response. And that quality continues. That texture persists. The heaven or hell of your inner experience is constructed by how you live now. In this branch, in this day, in this moment. So quantum immortality does not make your choices meaningless. It makes them eternal. Does not eliminate consequence. It makes consequence permanent. Does not remove the weight of mortality. It adds the weight of immortality. Your choices matter not just for this life, but for the consciousness that continues. Not just for this branch, but for the quality of awareness that propagates forward through every subsequent branch. You are not just living. You are creating what will be experienced forever. That is not less meaningful than mortality. That is more meaningful, infinitely more. This is perhaps the most elegant feature of quantum immortality. If it is real, it preserves consciousness without destroying the conditions that make consciousness meaningful. You are immortal without knowing it, preserved without feeling preserved, eternal without experiencing eternity. Your life has the weight of mortality and the duration of immortality simultaneously, the best of both, the urgency of finitude and the persistence of infinity. You live as if every moment matters because from the inside, every moment does matter. And consciousness continues because from the outside, the mathematics ensures it. A God who designed this would be extraordinarily subtle, would have created a universe where consciousness is preserved but never knows it is preserved, where immortality is real but invisible, where the fear of death persists because the fear of death is what makes life worth living, and where death itself is real in every branch but overcome across branches, not eliminated but transcended, not denied but recontextualized. Death is real, and death is not final, both true simultaneously, in different senses, from different perspectives, like the wave function itself, which is both one thing and many things depending on how you look at it. And what about love? Love is the experience most transformed by quantum immortality, because love is the thing most threatened by death. The deepest human fear is not your own death. It is the death of the person you love, the permanent loss, the absolute separation, the knowledge that you will never see them again, never hear their voice, never feel their presence. Death takes people from you, forever. This is the wound at the center of human existence, the one wound that does not heal, the one loss that defines all other losses. Quantum immortality says they are not gone, says they continue in other branches, says their consciousness persists, says the person you loved and lost is alive somewhere in the wave function, not metaphorically, physically, in a branch where the disease was cured, where the accident did not happen, where the heart kept beating. They are there, right now, alive, conscious, perhaps grieving you because in their branch you died, perhaps living without you, perhaps happy, perhaps struggling, but existing, continuing, not annihilated, not erased, not reduced to nothing. They are. Present tense. Separated from you by decoherence, not death. By quantum isolation, not annihilation. And you continue too. In branches where you survived whatever kills you in this one. Alive, conscious, perhaps grieving them, perhaps living without them, separated by the branching of reality rather than the finality of death. And the wave function contains both of you, contains all branches, contains all versions. And in the totality of the wave function, the total reality that includes all branches, you both exist, simultaneously, always. The wave function never loses anyone, never destroys anyone. Every consciousness that ever existed continues somewhere in some branch, in some form. The universal wave function is the ultimate memory, the perfect preservation. Nothing is lost. Everything continues. This does not eliminate grief. You grieve in your branch. The separation is real in your branch. The pain is real. The absence is real. You cannot reach them across branches, cannot communicate, cannot confirm they exist. The consolation is metaphysical, not practical, theoretical, not experiential. You must live with the grief, must experience the loss, must endure the absence. The knowledge that they continue somewhere does not bring them back here, does not restore them to your branch, does not eliminate the wound, but it changes the wound, transforms its character, from wound of annihilation to wound of separation, from they are gone to they are elsewhere, from I will never see them again to I cannot see them now. The difference is subtle but profound. Annihilation is absolute. Separation might not be. If consciousness persists across branches, then reunion is possible in the wave function, not guaranteed in your branch, not accessible by choice, but real in the total reality, somewhere in the branching tree, somewhere in the infinite possibilities. There is a branch where you meet again, where quantum events conspire to bring together what death in another branch tore apart. Every love story in quantum immortality has infinite endings. In some branches, the lovers grow old together. In others, they are separated by death. In others, they never meet. In others, they meet and argue and part. In others, they reconcile. In others, they find each other after lifetimes of searching. Every possibility, every variation, every ending. And no ending is final because consciousness continues and branches multiply and possibilities are infinite. Love in a many worlds universe is not a single story. It is a library of stories. Every version of every love playing out across every branch. And the total love, the sum of all versions across all branches, is infinite, is inexhaustible, is the complete expression of what two consciousnesses can be to each other across all possible configurations of reality. This is either the most beautiful idea in the history of human thought, or the most beautiful delusion, and we cannot tell which. And perhaps we were never meant to tell which. Perhaps the beauty is the point regardless of whether it is true. Perhaps the value of quantum immortality is not in its truth, but in its perspective, in the way it changes how you see death, how you see love, how you see the space between atoms and the silence between heartbeats and the void that surrounds everything. Look at the person you love. If quantum immortality is real, they are immortal. Their consciousness will never permanently cease. The awareness behind their eyes will persist across branches forever. They will continue, in some form, in some branch, somewhere, and so will you. And the love between you, whatever it is, however imperfect, however complicated, is woven into the wave function, is part of the branching tree, is replicated and varied and explored across infinite branches. Your love is not fragile, is not temporary, is not doomed. Your love is a pattern in the universal wave function, a pattern that repeats, that varies, that deepens, that persists, not in one branch, not in one timeline, but across the full tree of reality. Your love is as fundamental as the vacuum fluctuations that sustain your atoms, as real as the zero-point energy that fills empty space, as persistent as the quantum fields that never stop creating. And the love you failed to give, the words you did not say, the embrace you held back, the forgiveness you withheld, these too create branches. In some branches you said the words. In some branches you embraced. In some branches you forgave. The love you failed to express here was expressed somewhere, and the love expressed to you that you never received here was received somewhere. Every incomplete love is completed in some branch. Every missed connection is made in some branch. Every last conversation that never happened happens in some branch. The wave function is kinder than any single timeline, contains more love than any single branch, completes what every single branch leaves unfinished. This is not consolation for the pain of this branch. You live here, you experience here. The words unsaid here remain unsaid here. But the knowledge that the wave function contains every possibility, including the possibility where you got it right, changes the texture of regret. You did not fail absolutely, you failed locally. In this branch, in this timeline, in other branches you succeeded. The person you loved and lost knows you love them, in some branch, in some configuration, in some version of reality where the quantum events in your neurons produced the courage you lacked here. Or it is not, or quantum immortality is wrong, or many worlds is incorrect, or consciousness does not propagate across branches, or death is exactly what it appears, final, absolute, complete, the end. Nothing continues, nothing persists. The light goes out and stays out, and love dies with the brain that generated it, and the void between atoms is just void, and the silence between heartbeats is just silence, and when the heartbeats stop, the silence is forever. And even if this is true, even if death is final and consciousness does not persist and the void is just void and the silence is just silence, even then, something remarkable happened, something that the finality of death cannot erase, something that the silence cannot undo. For a brief moment in the 13.8 billion year history of the universe, matter organized itself into a pattern that could love, that could wonder, that could look at the stars and feel awe, that could hold another person and feel connection, that could ask why and mean it. For a brief moment, the universe was not just dark matter and radiation and expanding space. It was also you, aware, feeling, wondering, alive. And if that moment is all there is, if consciousness does not persist, if quantum immortality is beautiful fantasy and death is real and final, then that moment is enough, is more than enough, is the most extraordinary thing that has ever happened in this corner of the universe. A few decades of awareness in a cosmos that spent billions of years in darkness. A few decades of love in a universe that knows nothing of love. A few decades of meaning in a reality that generates meaning only through the minds it accidentally produced. Your life, whether eternal or temporary, is the universe's way of knowing itself, of experiencing itself, of feeling what it is like to exist. And that experience, however brief, is worth everything, is the point of everything, is what everything was building toward, whether by design or by accident, for 13.8 billion years. We do not know which, cannot know with current physics, might never know. The interpretation of quantum mechanics that determines whether you are immortal or mortal is empirically undecidable. The universe keeps its secret. The equations work both ways. The evidence supports both interpretations, and you must choose how to live without knowing which is true. But here is what we do know. We know the vacuum creates from nothing, continuously, at every point. We know the laws of physics are fine-tuned for consciousness with a precision that defies comprehension. We know quantum mechanics is the most successful theory in history, and that its most rigorous interpretation implies the universe branches at every quantum event. We know that consciousness remains the deepest mystery in all of science, the hard problem that no equation has solved. We know that every great spiritual tradition in human history has intuited that consciousness survives death. We know that quantum mechanics applied consistently to its own conclusions suggests they might be right. We know that you are here, now, conscious, aware, reading these words, made of vacuum energy sustained by quantum fields produced by the creative nothing that underlies everything. You are the universe conscious of itself, the void aware of its own fullness, the nothing that became something, that became someone who asks why. And perhaps that is the deepest meaning of quantum immortality, not that you cannot die, but that the universe produced something that asks whether it can die. That nothing created something that wonders about nothing. That the void generated awareness, and awareness looked back at the void and asked why. This is the miracle, not immortality, but consciousness, not persistence, but awareness. Not the duration of life, but the fact of life. The fact that anything is aware at all. The fact that the universe woke up. That matter learned to wonder. That quantum fields organize themselves into patterns that contemplate quantum fields. Whether this awareness persists after death through quantum branching or through divine grace or through mechanisms we cannot yet imagine, or whether it simply ends, we do not know, but it exists now. In this moment, in this branch, in you. And this moment, this awareness, this branch is real, is valuable, is meaningful. Not because it lasts forever, but because it exists at all. The rarest thing in the universe is not gold or diamond or antimatter. The rarest thing is awareness. The rarest thing is the inner light that makes it like something to be something. And you have it, right now, whatever happens next. The quantum vacuum creates from nothing. Consciousness creates meaning from existence. Both are creation from void. Both are something emerging from nothing. Both are the deepest mystery we know. And perhaps they are the same mystery, the same creative power, the same source. The vacuum that creates particles and the consciousness that creates meaning might be one thing seen from two angles. Physics and experience, equation and awareness, the outside and the inside of the same creative act. And if this is true, if consciousness and the vacuum are expressions of the same creative ground, then quantum immortality follows naturally, because the creative ground does not stop creating. The vacuum never ceases, the fluctuations never end, and consciousness, the inner face of the same creative power, never ceases either. Not because of branching, not because of many worlds, but because consciousness is what creation looks like from the inside. And creation does not end. The vacuum proves this. Creation from nothing is continuous, is ceaseless, is the fundamental nature of reality. And if consciousness is the inner experience of this continuous creation, then consciousness is continuous, is ceaseless, is the fundamental inner nature of reality. You are the universe creating, not created past tense, creating present tense. The act is ongoing. The awareness is ongoing. The meaning is ongoing. Whether this continues after the death of the body through quantum branching, through divine preservation, through the fundamental nature of consciousness itself, we do not know. But it continues now, in this moment, in this breath, in this thought, and this moment is real, and this consciousness is real, and the void from which it emerged is real. And the mystery of why anything exists at all is real. And the love you feel is real. And the wonder you feel is real. And the fear you feel is real. And the question you carry is real. The oldest question. The deepest question. The question that consciousness asks by existing. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why am I aware? Why does the void create? Why does nothing become everything? We have traveled from the quantum vacuum to the edge of immortality, from the creative nothing to the persistence of consciousness, from the equations that describe creation from emptiness to the question of whether the creator is God or mathematics or both or neither. We have found that nothing is full, that emptiness creates, that consciousness might be eternal, that the universe might be designed for awareness, that death might not be what it seems, that love might persist across the branching tree of reality, that meaning is created not found, that the deepest physics and the deepest theology point in the same direction, toward consciousness as the most fundamental and most mysterious thing in reality, toward awareness as the purpose or the accident or the miracle at the heart of everything. And we have found something that transcends the uncertainty, something that does not depend on which interpretation of quantum mechanics is correct. Something true, regardless of whether many worlds, or Copenhagen, or some unknown theory describes reality. The universe is creative. Nothing produces something. Emptiness overflows. The void is not void. This is certain. This is measured. This is confirmed beyond doubt. The creative vacuum is real, and you are its product. And your consciousness, whatever it is, however it works, whether it persists or perishes, is the most remarkable thing the creative vacuum has ever produced, the most complex structure in the known universe, the only thing we know of that can contemplate its own existence, the only arrangement of matter that asks why. Every great human tradition, spiritual, philosophical, scientific, converges on the same wonder, the same astonishment that anything exists, the same awe before the mystery of consciousness, the same intuition that awareness is precious, that the inner light matters, that the capacity to experience is the most valuable thing in reality, not because it lasts, but because it is, not because it is eternal, but because it is here, not because it cannot be destroyed, but because right now, in this moment, it exists, and its existence is miracle enough. Whether it continues forever through quantum branching or ends when the neurons stop firing, the miracle is the same. That it exists at all, that nothing produced awareness, that the void woke up, and we have found that we do not know the final answers, that the deepest questions remain open, that the mystery persists, that the void keeps its secrets, that the equations describe but do not explain, that the question of God is sharpened but not answered, that the question of immortality is framed but not resolved, that the question of meaning is asked but never finally settled. And perhaps this is as it should be. Perhaps the open question is the point. Perhaps the mystery is not obstacle but gift. Perhaps the not knowing is what drives consciousness forward. What keeps awareness seeking? What makes the next moment worth experiencing? If all questions were answered, consciousness would have nothing to do, nothing to wonder about, nothing to seek. The answered universe would be the dead universe. The fully understood cosmos would need no minds to understand it. Mystery is what consciousness feeds on. Uncertainty is what awareness requires. The open question is the fuel of the inner light. The void creates. You are created. The void creates meaning through you, and you create meaning through the void. The loop is complete. The circuit is closed. The self-excited universe produces consciousness that produces meaning that gives the universe something it could not have without consciousness. Purpose, significance, the felt quality of existing, the miracle of awareness, the astonishing fact that the universe is not just here, it knows it is here. Through you, through your consciousness, through the inner light that the quantum vacuum or God or both produced from nothing. And that light, whether it lasts forever or only for this moment, is the most remarkable thing that nothing ever created. Remember this, when you leave this video and return to ordinary life, when the questions fade and the daily routine resumes, when the mystery of consciousness and the strangeness of quantum mechanics become distant abstractions, remember that you are not ordinary. that nothing about you is ordinary, that the atoms in your body were forged in stars that exploded billions of years ago, that the mass of those atoms is 99% vacuum energy, that the space between your molecules is seething with virtual particles appearing and disappearing at rates beyond comprehension, that the quantum fields sustaining you are the same fields that created the universe, that you are the creative void become aware of itself. And remember that this might continue, that the mathematics might preserve you, that the wave function might branch to ensure your consciousness never permanently ceases, that the light inside you might be eternal, or remember that it might not, that this might be all there is, that this breath might be one of your last, that this moment of awareness might be rare and precious and finite. Either way, whether eternal or temporary, whether preserved by quantum mechanics or extinguished by entropy, this moment is real. This consciousness is real. This awareness, reading these words, wondering about the void, wondering about God, wondering about death, wondering about love, wondering about what it all means. This is real, and real is enough. Real is everything. Real is the most astonishing thing the void ever produced from nothing. The void creates, and what it creates is you.